My brother smirked. "You don't know what it feels like to take chances." Then demanded my apartment to start fresh. After losing everything in his latest investment, so I told him, "And you never get what it's like to face consequences." For as long as I can remember, I was always the practical one in my family. I did everything by the book, graduated, got a job, worked my way up. My brother Lucas? He was the exact opposite. The risk taker, the dream chaser, the golden child destined to be a millionaire with his own company. You know the type. My hard work paid off when I landed my dream job, a fantastic position at a multinational company, exactly what I wanted. The only hitch? It was a 2-hour commute each way. 4 hours a day, gone. After just 2 weeks, I was utterly exhausted. I couldn't keep it up. I desperately needed a place closer. That weekend, during our usual family dinner at my parents' house, I brought up my commute nightmare. My mom and dad exchanged a look, and then my mom said, "We might have a solution for you." She asked, "Remember Grandma's old apartment? The one I inherited?" Of course, I remembered it. I spent my childhood weekends there. She continued, "The tenants just moved out, it's empty, and it's only 5 minutes from your job. If you want it, it's yours." I was ecstatic. I asked about the rent, and my mom gave me a price I could easily afford. I said yes immediately, without a second thought. It felt like a dream come true. But the moment the apartment situation was settled, my parents, predictably, pivoted right back to Lucas. That was always their favorite topic. So, I had my new place and a new job, while Lucas was supposedly landing 3 new clients, his business booming. And me? Still the boring one, working my office job, while he was their celebrated golden child, chasing his grand dreams. The very next day, I went to check out the apartment. And wow, the previous tenants had not been kind to it. It was a complete disaster. The only thing left was this ugly, old gray couch sitting lonely in the middle of the living room. I called my mom and asked, "Mom, do you mind if I do some renovations?" She shrugged it off. "Don't go crazy with colors, but do whatever you want. Remodel it however you like." That was my cue. That same night, I plunged into Pinterest and YouTube, soaking up inspiration. For the next 6 months, that apartment became my life. Every single day after work, I went straight there, painting, measuring, checking prices, visiting every furniture store, testing every mattress, watching countless tutorials. I mounted the TV, sanded, painted, fixed the flooring. I did everything myself. Every evening, every weekend, dedicated to transforming that space. And you know what? In the end, it was absolutely perfect. Exactly how I'd envisioned it. I walked around, just looking at everything with immense pride. I genuinely couldn't believe I had done it all on my own. It was beautiful. I couldn't wait for my mom to see it. When she finally came over, she did her usual serious inspection, scrutinizing every single detail. Then, she looked at me and said, "It's incredible." I couldn't believe it. My mom rarely, and I mean rarely, gave me compliments. And then she gave me a real hug. Not a quick pat, but a genuine embrace. In that moment, I truly felt like I did it. I finally did something that truly impressed her. Just 2 weeks later, at another family dinner, I was practically bursting with excitement. I had even bigger news to share. I'd been promoted again, my salary had skyrocketed, and I was now leading my own team. I had grown so much in the company in such a short time, and I couldn't wait to tell them. When a moment of silence finally fell, I jumped in. "Hey, I have some great news." I shared everything. My mom, barely looking up from her plate, just mumbled, "Oh, that's great, sweetie. Good for you." And just like that, they immediately launched back into talking about Lucas. That was the real conversation of the night. Apparently, a bigger, more technologically advanced company had moved into the city, and Lucas's delivery business was getting absolutely crushed. He was losing clients left and right. His business was struggling. Everything was at risk. My dad then casually dropped that they had decided to take out a huge loan to try and keep Lucas's company afloat. I couldn't help myself. I looked at them and asked, "Honestly, are you sure about this?" "Look, this new company is massive. It's going to be incredibly difficult to compete with their tech and all their money. It's going to be complicated. Both of them just looked at me and basically snapped, "You don't know anything about business. You've always played it safe, working in an office. You don't understand taking risks." They basically told me to shut up and not have an opinion. Then, my mom added the kicker: family always helps family. At that point, what more could I even say? I just stayed silent. The next few months were an absolute train wreck, just like I predicted. Lucas's business crashed and burned. One day, my mom called me to tell me Lucas's company had officially gone bankrupt. He and his wife, Sarah, had to move back in with my parents. Just picture that chaos. My mom then whined to me, "Oh, Sarah is really struggling with this. You know how she is, always so concerned about appearances, and now she has to move back in with her in-laws." Yeah, guys, my sister-in-law Sarah? She was the absolute worst. Always bragging about being a CEO's wife, completely insufferable. That weekend, as usual, I went to my parents for dinner. Of course, Lucas and Sarah were there. The moment we sat down, Lucas launched into this pre-rehearsed speech about how businesses fail, all the hardships he'd faced, blah, blah, blah. Then Sarah, in her most dramatic voice, announced, "I don't think I can handle living like this much longer. With all due respect, no offense, but I need my own space." And then it happened. My brother turned to my parents and casually asked, "Hey, what's up with Grandma's apartment?" Guys, you should have seen my face. I immediately blurted out, hello. I live there. I remodeled the entire place. This person lives there." They completely ignored me. My mom, all excited, chirped, "Oh, that's right. Camila made the place beautiful. She renovated everything, and it looks amazing." Lucas and Sarah just exchanged this incredibly calculating look. I felt a cold knot in my gut, you know? That feeling when you just know something terrible is coming. But I tried to reassure myself, no way. They wouldn't dare. This isn't happening. Well, my gut feeling was spot on. 2 days later, I was walking home, just thinking about what show I'd binged that night, when I heard familiar voices inside my apartment. I walked in to find my mom, Lucas, and Sarah, just chilling in my living room. I immediately demanded, "Mom, what's going on? What is this? You should have called me before coming over. Asked for permission. Said something." And my mom, with the absolute audacity, just said, "I'm the owner. I can come whenever I want." She didn't even look me in the eye. Meanwhile, Sarah was literally walking around, touching my curtains, checking every tiny detail, observing everything. She went into my bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen, like she was inspecting a property she was considering buying. Eventually, she sat down on my couch, flashed this sickeningly smug, cat-like grin, and said, "This place is perfect. We can move in next week." I was utterly dumbfounded. "What?" I yelled. "Excuse me. I live here. I renovated this place. This is my home. What are you even talking about?" My mom cut me off. "Excuse me, but I'm the owner. I decide who lives here." I was stunned into silence. "Are you serious? What about all the work I did? All the effort? I painted the walls, remodeled everything, fixed the floors, bought all the furniture. I did all of this with my own sweat and hard work." Then, that woman, my own mother, said, "Well, since you renovated it, it's now worth 3 times more than before. So, if you can't pay triple the rent, you have 1 week to leave." Guys, obviously, there was no way I could afford triple the rent. Imagine paying for 3 apartments at once. It was impossible. And my coward of a brother? He said absolutely nothing. My mom, still not even looking at me, just repeated, "You have 1 week." Then they just left. I was left standing there in the middle of my home, completely numb, not knowing what to do. I could have crumpled to the floor and cried all night, but a different emotion surged through me, sheer, cold resolve. Instead, I immediately started looking for a new apartment. Right away. Searching. By the middle of the night, I had already found the perfect place. The next morning, for the first time in 3 years, I called my job and told them I couldn't come in. By 9 a.m., I was at that new apartment. By 10 a.m., I had signed the contract and paid the deposit. After that, I called a moving company and begged them to move me that same day. Of course, I had to pay extra for the urgency, but I didn't care. When the movers arrived, I was in the middle of my living room, practically orchestrating the whole thing like a conductor. That's mine. That's mine. That's coming with me. That too. Take everything. Even the custom-built wardrobe I'd installed? Gone. Every single thing I bought, I took. Load it up. Let's go. Into the truck. Into the truck. By the time I left, the apartment looked exactly like it had when I first moved in. All that was left was that hideous old gray couch, sitting there in the middle of an empty room, just like I found it. Every single thing I brought in, I took out. I put the keys in an envelope, passed by my parents' house, slipped them under their door, and drove off to my new home. The next morning, all hell broke loose. At 7 a.m., my phone started blowing up. Calls from my mom, Sarah, Lucas, all of them. I calmly made myself a cup of coffee, ignored every single call, and only after finishing my coffee did I decide, okay, let's see what she wants. I answered my mom's call, and the very first thing she screeched was, "How could you do this? What makes you think you had the right to empty the apartment? How dare you?" I simply said, "Listen to me. I had every right because I bought every single one of those things. I have all the receipts. If you want, I can send them to you. No problem." My mom completely lost it. She called me things I literally cannot repeat in this video. I won't even try. Lucas and Sarah started bombarding me with messages. It was insane. But me? I stayed calm. I ignored them all and focused on settling into my beautiful new home. We didn't talk for about a month. And I won't lie, I did think about them sometimes. Of course, I wondered, how are they doing? Does my mom still make lasagna every Sunday? Did they ever get furniture for that apartment? What's going on with Lucas's company? Nostalgia hit me sometimes, that familiar longing. But every time it did, I forced myself to let it go. Exactly 1 month later, my mom called me. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but a tiny part of me, a foolish sliver of hope, still answered. The very first thing she said, straight to the point, was, "I didn't receive your rent payment this month." I burst out laughing. "Of course you didn't. You kicked me out. I don't live there anymore. Did you forget I moved out, sweetheart?" She then said, "Well, we thought you would keep paying the rent. You know, we took out a loan to help Lucas. Lucas can't pay rent right now because his company is struggling. We're paying off the loan. We thought you would continue paying the rent. Family helps family." Guys, can you believe the audacity? She actually expected me to pay 2 rents after everything they did to me, just because poor Lucas needed help with their small loan. And then she hit me with that classic line, "Family helps family." Oh, really? Does family helps family mean kicking one child out to make room for another? I straight up told her, "So you're throwing the family helps family line around now when you're the ones who need help?" The only thing she could say was, "I'm very disappointed in you." I just replied, "Funny, I was just about to say the same thing to you." The call ended. I blocked her. I blocked Lucas. I blocked Sarah. I blocked my dad. I blocked all of them. Every single one. Weeks and months went by. I still had a relationship with some of my other relatives, and one day I met up with my cousin. She told me Lucas had, predictably, started yet another new business. And my parents? They had been going around to all our relatives, literally begging for money so Lucas could start over. And guess what? Every single relative said no. My cousin then told me my parents were now thinking about taking out another loan to fund Lucas's latest idea. She looked at me, a worried expression on her face, and asked, "So, what do you think?" I stayed quiet for a moment, letting the silence hang. Then I just said, "You know, a few months ago, this would have really worried me. It would have affected me deeply. But now? Not my circus, not my monkeys." And honestly, since I left that house, my life took a turn I hadn't even expected. Not only was I fully settled and thriving in my new apartment, but professionally, I kept climbing higher than ever. After some more time at the company, I got promoted again. My salary skyrocketed, and I wasn't just leading a team, I was handling high-level projects that really mattered. That's when I started seeing everything from a completely different perspective. At first, all I wanted was to get away from my family, forget about them, and move on. But over time, I realized their situation could actually be very convenient for me. It wasn't that I wanted to reconnect, but something inside me wouldn't let this go completely. I don't know if it was anger, the need for revenge, or just this deep-seated feeling that this wasn't over yet. Grandma's apartment. Since I was little, that place had meant something profound to me. It wasn't just a property, it was a part of my childhood, my memories, my history. No matter how easily they had thrown me out, that place still felt like it belonged to me. I should be the one to have it. And now, with money and the perfect opportunity, I could finally make that happen. Because, of course, my parents were utterly desperate. Lucas had failed again with his so-called new business. My cousin told me he'd tried some kind of online venture, one of those ridiculous get-rich-quick ideas that were obviously doomed from the start. My parents were broke, going door to door to every relative, begging for financial help. But no one wanted to deal with Lucas's disasters anymore. That's when I saw my opportunity. All I had to do was wait for the perfect moment. It didn't take long. My phone rang. It was my mother, calling from an unknown number since I'd blocked her. I answered without saying my name, waiting for her to speak first. "Sweetheart," her voice sounded hesitant, almost nervous. I let out a low chuckle. "Sweetheart? That's funny. I thought you had gotten rid of me." She sighed, a heavy, dramatic sound. "Look, I know things ended badly, but I wanted to talk to you." I didn't say a word, just let her squirm. She kept going. "Lucas, he's struggling. His business isn't doing well. Your father and I are in a very complicated situation." "Of course, they were," I murmured, pretending to care. "Oh, yes," her voice was strained, as if it pained her to say the words. "We need a loan. Something to help us stay afloat while we figure things out." The cherry on top, truly. "Interesting," I said slowly, savoring every single syllable. "And tell me, how many other relatives did you ask before coming to me?" Silence. "Oh, come on, Mom. You really think I don't know? You're only calling me because no one else wants to finance Lucas's mess." She hesitated, then began to protest, but I cut her off immediately. "That's not it. It's exactly that. But guess what? Today is your lucky day, because I have an offer." Total silence on her end. "I'll lend you the money," I said, drawing out the words, but on one condition. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Grandma's apartment," I continued. "I want it in my name. Officially. Paper signed, fully transferred to me." But my mother started, but I immediately cut her off. "No buts. Take it or leave it." Another long pause. "If you're so sure Lucas will turn things around," I said, with a smirk in my voice, "then you have nothing to worry about, right? If he succeeds, you pay me back, and I return the property. Simple. But if he fails again, well, then I keep what should have been mine all along." I waited. I could practically hear her breathing, heavy and uneven. I knew she was choking on her own pride, struggling with the humiliation of having to agree to my terms. "I'll talk to your father," she finally managed. "Perfect," I replied. "But decide quickly. This is a one-time offer." Then I hung up. Now all I had to do was wait. Knowing my parents, they would go back and forth, debating it endlessly. But in the end, they would do what they always did. Choose Lucas. And Lucas, well, he would never be able to pay off that debt. Grandma's apartment would finally be mine. And this? This was only the beginning. Negotiating with my own family felt like this twisted psychological game, but in the end, as expected, they gave in. A few days after that call, my father invited me to a formal meeting at their house, as if this were some legitimate business transaction and not an act of sheer desperation. When I arrived, I saw my mother holding the apartment transfer papers. Her expression was utterly bitter, like she was forcefully swallowing her pride. My father, sitting next to her, looked like a completely defeated man. And Lucas? Lucas didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. "It's all ready," my father mumbled, pushing the papers toward me. I took them calmly, reading every single line, every clause. The lawyer I'd hired had already checked everything and assured me there were no hidden tricks. When I finally saw their signatures at the bottom, a wave of profound satisfaction washed over me. "What's so funny?" my mother spat, clearly irritated by my slight smirk. "Oh, nothing," I replied, signing the documents at my own pace and placing them carefully in my folder. "Just making sure you're not trying to scam me again." She looked away. The silence in the room was suffocating. "Well," I said, snapping the folder shut and standing up. "Now that everything's settled, you can come pick up the money tomorrow. I'll transfer it as agreed." My father let out a shaky sigh of relief. My mother still looked like she was choking on pure humiliation. "I knew you wouldn't leave us hanging," my father said, trying desperately to smooth things over. "Of course not," I said, forcing a sweet smile. "After all, family helps family. Isn't that what you always say?" Lucas finally looked up, shooting daggers at me, but I just held his gaze, completely unfazed. After officially owning the house, I decided to renovate it completely again. Now that it was truly mine, I wanted it to reflect my style, not my mother's outdated, tacky decorations. I hired a team and immediately started the renovations. I painted the walls, replaced the floors, modernized the kitchen, redid the bathrooms. The apartment turned out absolutely flawless. Spending time there, overseeing the transformation, awakened something deep inside me. I had always loved that place. The only problem? Lucas and Sarah were still living there, and now they were paying rent to me. Of course, I wasn't about to let that opportunity go to waste. From the moment they signed the lease, I made sure to collect their rent promptly each month. At first, they paid without complaint. After all, they truly had no other choice. But as time passed and the deadline for repaying me drew closer, I started noticing subtle signs of tension. My mother would call me more frequently, always asking if I could give them a discount or be more flexible with the payments. "You know, your brother is trying to get back on his feet," she'd say, in that annoyingly fake motherly tone. "I do," I'd respond, my voice cold. "And I also know he has a roof over his head because I allow it." After that, she always went silent. Then, the day I had been waiting for finally arrived, the deadline to repay me. My mother called. "We need to talk," she said, her voice heavy with a forced seriousness. When I arrived at my parents' house, Lucas and Sarah were sitting in the living room looking utterly miserable. My parents were tense. Something was definitely off. "Well," I said, crossing my arms, "I'm listening." "We have the money," my father announced, trying to sound triumphant. I raised an eyebrow, a slow, deliberate movement. "Really?" "Yes," my mother confirmed, but there was something strange in her tone, a hint of desperation. Lucas and Sarah seemed incredibly uneasy. "Great," I said, settling into the couch. "Then transfer it, and we'll be done with this." That's when my mother dropped the bomb. "The apartment," she began, her voice gaining a surprising confidence. "We want it back." For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard her. "Excuse me," I said, a dry laugh escaping my lips. "We have the money now, so we want the house back," she insisted, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. My smile faded. "No," I replied flatly. "What do you mean no?" Lucas snapped, jumping up from his seat. Exactly what I said. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "This house is mine now. You made a deal. And as you yourself said before, business is business." "But it was just a loan," my mother protested, her voice rising. "It was only a guarantee. We have the money now." "Oh, really?" I feigned interest, a little too dramatically. "And tell me, where exactly did you suddenly get that amount from?" My parents exchanged nervous glances. Lucas and Sarah averted their eyes, refusing to meet mine. "Oh," I nodded to myself. "You borrowed from a loan shark, didn't you?" The silence was all the confirmation I needed. I let out a dry, bitter chuckle. "My God." I shook my head, standing up. "You people are pathetic. You threw me out like garbage, and now you've gone into debt with a loan shark just to try and take the house back." "We couldn't lose this house," my mother screamed, her face contorted. "It's our home. Our home." I laughed bitterly. "You kicked me out of here without hesitation, and now it suddenly matters to you?" Lucas, consumed with rage, practically lunged from his seat. "You've always been jealous," he spat, his voice thick with venom. You've always wanted to take everything from me, even when we were kids. But this time, you went too far. I stepped closer to him, completely unfazed. The only thing I did, I said coldly, my voice cutting through his anger, was teach you a lesson. I'm not responsible for the fact that you're incapable of managing anything and constantly need mommy and daddy to clean up your mess. His jaw clenched tight. For a second, I honestly thought he was going to do something, but I knew deep down he wouldn't dare. I took a deep breath and dropped the final bombshell. If you really want to keep living in my house, everyone turned to look at me, their faces shocked. The rent is now 3 times what you're paying before. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. What? Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. If you want to stay, pay up, I said with a shrug, a cold, unfeeling expression on my face. If not, find somewhere else to live. My mother went absolutely pale. This has to be a joke, my father murmured, his voice barely audible. No, I smiled icily. This is business. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the door. Before stepping out, I looked back at them one last time. You have until the end of the month to decide, I said calmly. Then I walked away, leaving them to drown in the pathetic mess they had created. Weeks had passed since that day when I made it crystal clear, if they wanted to keep living in my house, they would have to pay 3 times the rent. They hadn't contacted me since. The deadline I had given them was about to expire, and I was patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Then, one of my cousins told me something that made me laugh for a solid 5 minutes. They never borrowed money from a loan shark. All that dramatic tension, the desperate expressions, the whole pathetic act, it was all a lie. They had completely made up that story to guilt-trip me into giving the house back. The sheer audacity. After everything they had done to me, they still thought I would fall for their little manipulation game. This only confirmed what I already knew. They had never changed. They were still the same selfish, deceitful people who always tried to get away with things without taking any responsibility. But that was fine. If they wanted to play, I would play better. I waited for the deadline to arrive. I followed everything by the book, meticulously. I didn't rush, didn't act hastily. And just as expected, on the exact day of the deadline, they transferred the money to me. Of course, it was the money they owed me from the loan. I had no legal or, frankly, moral obligation to give them the house back just because they finally paid what they were supposed to. Then, exactly 1 day after the deadline passed, I put my plan into action. I waited until they left the house. Lucas and Sarah always visited my parents on the weekends. As soon as they were gone, I made a few calls. Some friends were already on standby, ready to help me, and together, we emptied the house. We left nothing. Clothes, furniture, personal belongings, everything was carefully packed up and moved. I had it all stacked neatly in my parents' garage. If they wanted their stuff, they could go pick it up there. When I stood in that empty house, looking around, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. It was mine. For the first time, truly, undeniably mine. Revenge had never felt more like justice. Lucas and Sarah found out hours later. The chaos that followed was immediate. My phone exploded with calls. My mother, my father, Lucas, even Sarah. Everyone was calling me like some terrible tragedy had struck. I didn't answer. I already knew what they were going to say, and I didn't care. Soon enough, they showed up at my door, absolutely furious. Lucas was screaming like a madman. Sarah was sobbing like she had lost everything in life. My parents looked at me like I was some kind of monster. How could you do this? Lucas roared. This is our house, my mother whined. You crossed the line, my father attempted to say, trying to project some authority. I calmly opened the door, met their eyes, and with the most serene voice I said, the house is mine. For a second, they were completely speechless. You're a monster, Lucas shouted, his face turning an angry shade of red. I raised my hand, silencing him instantly. Try anything, and I'll call the police. You really think I'm playing? Lucas clenched his fists, but he didn't dare move. You stole from us? Sarah shrieked hysterically. No, I corrected her, my voice sharp. I bought it. I loaned you the money. I set my terms. I waited months to see if you'd keep your word. And instead of being decent about it, you lied to me. You thought I was stupid enough to fall for it again. My mother tried to speak, but I held up my hand again, cutting her off. I've heard enough. Your belongings are in my parents' garage. If you want them, go pick them up. But this house, you will never set foot in it again. Are you kicking us out? My father asked, as if he couldn't possibly believe it. Absolutely, I smiled coldly. They exchanged glances, as if searching for some last-minute miracle. Lucas looked like he was about to explode, his face red, his hands trembling. But I wasn't afraid of them. They had no power over me anymore. I took a deep breath and delivered my final, definitive blow. Oh, and before I forget, I pulled out my phone and, right in front of them, blocked each and every one of them. First my mother, then my father, Lucas, Sarah, every single one of them erased from my life. There, I said, slipping my phone back into my pocket. Now, if you'll excuse me. And I slammed the door in their faces. They screamed outside for a while. Lucas pounded on the door, cursing, but I didn't care. I turned on the TV, sat down on my couch, and finally, truly enjoyed the peace of my home. Would they try to sue me one day? Maybe. But they couldn't do anything. The paperwork was signed. The property was legally mine. Everything was done by the book. Did I regret it? Not for a single second. Time passed, and just as I had predicted, Lucas and my parents tried to take me to court. I heard about it through a cousin who still kept in touch. And honestly, when I got the news, I laughed out loud for a good few minutes. Did they seriously think they had a chance? From the very beginning, I had done everything by the book. Every transaction, every document, every relevant conversation, I had recorded it all. The house was legally mine. There was no clause, no proof, no contract stating that once they paid off the loan, I would be required to return the house to them. They had absolutely nothing. But of course, that didn't stop them from trying. Lucas filed a lawsuit against me, claiming that the house had been given as a temporary guarantee, and that once the money was paid back, the property should have been transferred back to him or my parents. They accused me of bad faith, of theft, of betraying their trust. Basically, they threw every possible argument at the court, hoping something would stick. On the day of the hearing, I sat calmly in the courtroom while Lucas, my mother, and my father arrived, all looking sour and defeated already. Sarah wasn't even there. Maybe even she didn't believe in this pathetic attempt. The first thing my lawyer did was present the official property documents. Your Honor, he stated, this is the signed and registered deed proving that my client is the sole legal owner of the property in question. The judge picked up the papers, skimmed through them, read for a few moments, then looked straight at Lucas. Do you have any document proving that there was an agreement stating the property would be returned? Lucas swallowed hard. He glanced at my mother, who quickly looked away. My father let out a deep, defeated sigh. No, Lucas tried to argue, his voice already sounding desperate, but it was a verbal agreement. The judge raised an eyebrow. A verbal agreement? Yes, Lucas insisted. It was an agreement between the family. My lawyer smirked, already expecting this ridiculous excuse. With all due respect, Your Honor, we all know that a verbal agreement regarding real estate holds no legal weight. Furthermore, we have messages exchanged between the parties where no mention was ever made of the house being returned. My client requested the property as collateral, and ownership was legally transferred. The judge flipped through the documents once more. After a few seconds of silence, he looked at Lucas and my parents. So, you signed the papers, transferred ownership to her, never filed any legal request to reverse the transaction, but now you want her to simply give the house back because it was a verbal agreement between family? Lucas opened his mouth, but had no response. The judge sighed, clearly losing patience. Case dismissed. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Just like that. Lucas went pale. My mother covered her face with her hands, and my father didn't even try to argue. They had lost. No appeal, no way out. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt an indescribable sense of relief. It was official. The house was mine, and no one could ever take it from me. Lucas walked past me in the hallway, his eyes burning with pure hatred. My mother couldn't even bring herself to look at me, and my father just walked off without a word. That was the last time I ever saw them. After that day, they never contacted me again. No calls, no messages, no attempts to reach out. It was as if I had died to them. And honestly, I had never felt better. At first, I'd catch myself thinking about them occasionally, not out of sadness, but out of curiosity. How are they dealing with everything? Had Lucas finally managed to recover from yet another spectacular failure? Had my parents finally realized they had spent their whole lives betting on the wrong horse? But soon, I realized that none of it truly mattered, because in the end, I was the only one who actually won. Let's break it down. Lucas, the business genius, the great entrepreneur, the golden child who took risks and chased his dreams, was still broke, still relying on mommy and daddy to survive. His revolutionary business ideas? All spectacular failures. His brilliant entrepreneurial vision? Completely worthless. And me? The rejected daughter, the boring office worker, the one who was never acknowledged, never encouraged, never valued? I now had a house under my name that generated extra income. I had rock-solid financial stability, a good job, and I never had to beg anyone for anything ever again. At the end of the day, who was the real entrepreneur? The answer was obvious. My success didn't come from delusions. It didn't come from big, empty dreams. It came from my intelligence, my hard work, and my ability to recognize real opportunities. Lucas? He only knew how to waste money and blame others. And my parents? Well, now they have to face reality. They had spent their whole lives worshiping a spoiled, incompetent, and, frankly, failed son, while treating their daughter like she was utterly insignificant. Yet, in the end, I was the only one who actually built something for myself. And you know the funniest part? If they had treated me with even a shred of respect, if they hadn't kicked me out of that house years ago, maybe I would have actually helped Lucas for real. But they made their choice, and now they had to live with it. So, I moved on with my life with no regrets, without ever looking back. This whole ordeal completely changed my perspective on family, loyalty, and standing up for yourself. It was a tough lesson, but I came out stronger. Have you ever faced such blatant favoritism or betrayal from your own family? What would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments below. I'd really love to hear your thoughts.